that he didn't have much use for Michael Flynn, and basically he had suggested he was a traitor at one point, remarks he later tried to walk back. So I don't think he has much use for the defendant in this case, and I think it's unpredictable what he'll be able to do. Now, whether his trying to go ahead and pronounce sentence would ever withstand review by the higher court would remain to be seen. But I don't think we know what's going to come of this.
Yeah. No, it sounds like it. With regard to the press and the coverage of this Russia story, and as it sort of unravels in different pieces here, the New York Post editorial board wrote this today. This is the headline, it looks like President Obama ordered up phony Russiagate scandal. And it goes on to say, as part of that piece, Pulitzer Prizes were won for blaring utter fiction. The Trump administration was kneecapped out of the gate. Innocents like Flynn were bankrupted along the way. Say this about Obama: he knows how to play dirty. Is very strong words there from the New York Post editorial board, Britt.
Yeah, and I don't think we yet know enough to say that Obama ordered and directed all this, but his name has now been drawn into it because of that now famous January 2017 meeting when he was briefed by, when it became clear he'd been briefed by Comey on the Flynn wiretap, and Sally Yates, who was acting as Attorney General at the time, was in the meeting and she hadn't heard about it, so it was pretty clear that Comey and Obama were working pretty closely here, and the FBI had gone around Maine Justice to do the Flynn interview that it ended up doing. So there's a lot to investigate there, but I don't think we can say that Obama directed this, but we're probably going to find out. As for the journalism involved in the pursuit of that story, the collusion narrative that we lived with for so very long before it was blown up in the Mueller report, it was the worst journalistic fiasco of my now more than 50-some years in journalism. It was a disaster. And you look at what the editor of the New York Times, Dean Baquet, said about it. He said he had set up his whole newsroom, his whole journalistic operation was to cover that story. And it ended up, going nowhere. It was a terrible journalistic misjudgment, and it was rooted in their view, in my opinion, it was rooted in their view of Donald Trump, that when this charge arose, they thought so little of him, that he was such a terrible person, that it had to be true. And the Washington Post and the New York Times pursued it relentlessly. Their coverage did not reflect any real doubt that it might not turn out to be true at any time. And in the end, it all blew up. You would think they'd learn. They don't seem to learn, though, these journalists who were involved in that. They got the whole story about the Covington kids wrong, and it goes on. It's still going on. And I think the coverage of the coronavirus epidemic has reflected this. There's a desire that to see this thing as this shutdown should continue endlessly, and anything that points in that direction they love, and anything that doesn't, they don't.
All right, I gotta let you go, Britt, but I want to leave everyone with just this. This is the citation for the Pulitzer Prize that went to the New York Times and the Washington Post for deeply sourced, relentlessly reported coverage in the public interest that dramatically furthered the nation's understanding of Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election and its connections to the Trump campaign, the president-elect's transition team, and his eventual administration. So I just leave that with everybody to think what they will of it in light of what we are learning in recent days. Britt, thank you, as always. Good to see you.
You bet, Martha. Thank you. You too.
So as Congress squares off over another $3 trillion relief package, some Democrats want to send every American over the age of 16 $2,000 a month until employment gets back to